I'm going to share with you a intimate view of where I am now, where I have been, and where I'm going, all based on this intersection of the future, innovation, and I'm going to introduce the notion of faith. I've been a 10-year forecaster for a little more than 35 years now. So I've kind of outlived my forecast 3.5 times over. I was also, before I was a forecaster, I was a seminarian at the divinity school that Martin Luther King attended, studying world religions and intrigued with this notion of the many flavors of faith. I never chose to be ordained, but I could have been, but I've continued to be interested in faith. So today I'd like to draw this thread between faith, the future, and innovation. So the essence of the talk is summarized here. This is using a program called Wordle, if you haven't seen it, which is kind of a content analysis of the words in the speaker's notes, which you'll receive right after this talk. So you don't have to worry about taking detailed notes. This is kind of the words and the concepts all together. So if you're a Gestalt kind of person, this is the speech and you can leave now. Innovation for me is meaningful improvement of well-being for the future. So to me, innovation makes meaning. And this is a very values-based definition of innovation. I'm interested in making the world a better place. I think as you look 10 years ahead, well-being will be the critical core issue. Most of our clients now have major activities underway that are called something like well-being. We're doing a new forecast right now on external future forces affecting well-being. And you'll see in a moment why I think that's so important. Faith is a meaningful leap into uncertainty. So it isn't a blind leap, it's a meaningful leap into uncertainty. So notice innovation makes meaning, and faith makes meaning. This is the way we do our magic at Institute for the Future, and it's described in detail in the book that you're receiving this morning. It's an organic process. If a physician looks at this, he or she will say, eyeball. But notice the underlying metaphor. Mark, we use binoculars for foresight for exactly the same reason as Mark talked about. When you're doing 10-year forecasting, we always look 30 to 50 years back. So we think 50-year swaths of time, almost nothing happens that's completely new. Almost everything that happens was tried and failed 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. So the question is not what's new. The question is what's ready to take off. And you need to be an innovator. You need that swath of time. That's why I think the clip that we opened with, while it's provocative, it's also very misleading. Because these swaths of time are so important. Most things that look like they're new are not new. So we have to understand that, but we're going, insight is the target. So the reason you do foresight is not to predict. Nobody can predict the future. If somebody tells you they can predict the future, you shouldn't believe them, especially if they're from California. But what you can do is a forecast, a plausible, internally consistent, provocative view of what you think will happen. That's what we do in a very disciplined way each year with our 10-year forecast, a Tech Horizons and a Health Horizons forecast. And we do it so it provokes a quest like we're on today. So the purpose of forecasting is to provoke questions, to provoke quests, and to invoke action or evoke action. So here's the first forecast. If you look back 10 years, the last decade was driven by engineering. It was the first stage of the digital age. The next big economic driver is biology, and it will be the global health economy. So we're going to create the DNA of cultures of innovation in a few moments. We're going to be using this biological metaphor, and that's exactly what we should be doing as innovators. But notice the economics of this. It's the global well-being economy. It's not just sick care. It's not just health and wellness. It's well-being in all of its various manifestations. So this is the map. And if you could now open your hymnals and look inside of the book jacket. Take your book jacket off. You'll probably want to follow on from here on. And I hope this map will be a provocation for you for the rest of the day now. This is our latest 10-year forecast map. The architecture is a kind of organic matrix. There are 5 driving forces that you see in the columns. There are these large circles, which are hot zones of opportunity and threat, and the smaller circles are what we call signals, indicators from the present world that suggest that that future is beginning to happen. So you'll also notice the frame over this, and it's explained in the book, this notion of the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So every 10-year forecast we do now starts from the assumption it will be a permanently VUCA world. So one of my big concerns is in only a 13-minute talk, I may depress you. But it's important that you realize that the VUCA world is not going to calm down, it's going to get worse. That's the beginning assumption. But as you look through that and you look 10 years ahead, and I talk about this in the speaker notes, you'll see that it's possible to flip this VUCA world because volatility yields to vision. And innovators see things that others don't see. Uncertainty yields to understanding. Innovators sense pain that others ignore, particularly in the developing world. Complexity yields to clarity, and here innovators want just enough clarity to be suggestive, but they don't want certainty. And finally, ambiguity yields to agility. So innovation in the VUCA world is like running in fast staccato steps through sharp rocks. That's the nature of innovation. We're going to get a sense of that. That's the roller coaster that Nick talked about. So in 35 years of 10-year forecasting, this is the most frightening 10-year forecast I've ever seen. And it's the most hopeful. And I'm going to suggest to you why. So faith in the future, as I call it, intentional double meaning, faith in the future is a leap into the VUCA world that gives meaning. Faith is very different from rote belief. Faith speaks quietly with strength and humility. Rote belief shouts. When my dad died, my mom said, "I have faith. I don't know what I believe, but I have faith." Faith is a kind of trust, a leap into that uncertainty that innovators know. Innovators like being unsettled. Rote belief is settled and settling, but it's often wrong, especially in the VUCA world, and it's sometimes dangerous. So both faith and innovation live in this space between knowing too soon, which is the classic mistake of the problem solver, classic mistake of fundamentalist religions, classic mistake of true believer politicians, and knowing too late, which is the classic mistake of the academic, the classic mistake of the passivist, the extreme passivist. So you still need to decide in the VUCA world, and that's where innovation comes into play. Unfortunately, this future, this VUCA world, is going to be too uncertain for many people. So extreme uncertainty will foster more extreme groups, and extreme groups will tend to be more skilled users of digital media than more moderate groups. So this is one example I like, Bible Bar. It's also very cool in the sense that it's a evangelical Christian group, but it's kosher. So this is the image that's on the front of the book. It's a real internet traffic diagram done by a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon, Chris Harrison, who does art forms based on internet traffic diagrams. And it's the first hint at what the book was published just a year ago now. And since that last year, the big blossoming has been the big blossoming of the cloud, of cloud computing, as we're starting to call it. So this is the first image of the cloud. And this is the environment I think we have to talk about today as the context for innovation. Cloud computing is anything that happens on the net beyond your device. Finally, the John Gage line from the 80s, the network is the computer. It's finally going to be true. And we're just seeing the first hints of it now, but the cloud will encourage faith. It'll amplify innovation, particularly in developing worlds. So this is our latest tech forecast. Today, we're voice and text pretty much globally. By 2020, we've got cloud video, we've got web, we've got location, and something like today's iPhone, but much better, much more open. But it's hinted by today's iPhone. So the cloud is a new commons. that will kindle more innovation, the more people who get engaged. So these are the network effects that we talk about that are so different from traditional commons. The more connected we become, the safer, the more powerful, and the more free we will be, but also the more dangerous it will be. Because the cloud means people carry clouds of resources with them right at the moments where they're living everyday life. So this is an artifact created by my colleague Jason Tester in Korea, and it shows what will happen thinking 5 to 10 years ahead when anything can be a display. So in this case, we pop up a display in our sleeve instead of looking through the viewfinder. It's an OLED kind of display, and it says as you look at a bottle of pomegranate juice, this item traveled 8,291 miles and made 8 stops. It says the rating is 6.1 according to your trusted source, but notice it's only 83 people. But you trust it anyway. It's right at that moment. It's a trusted network. It asks you to rate the item. It doesn't even ask if you've used the item. So we're going to have that moment of truth where you're going to have that feeling of engagement right at that moment, but it may not be accurate. You could have something like couponing, and you could have instant networks forming. Anyone want to split fresh basil from your trusted network? So that's just one example. We're going to show you some artifacts later in the day. But in this world, reciprocity is the currency. So reciprocity requires faith, and in the cloud, you must have that faith that if you give things away, you'll get back even more in return. And this will become the basis for innovation, this reciprocity quest. So my hypothesis is that innovation is the biggest innovation opportunity in history. So we've got this tremendous moment now where what we think we know about the internet is about to be very different. And we got to be prepared for that because that'll be the context for innovation. And the wild card here, we talked about kids earlier in Nick's talk, a generation, if you're 25 or less now, is about 6 years. So it's true that today's 20-somethings are very hip and very cool with today's social media. That's not where we're going to be 5 to 10 years from now. And those same kids are completely out of touch with a 19-year-old. And 19-year-olds are completely out of touch with 13-year-olds. And only those 14 or less are true digital natives. And they're the ones we should be learning from. We have to be reverse mentoring with that crowd because they are the swing for the cloud. They are the swing for the culture of innovation that we're talking about creating. So here are my questions I leave you with. What can innovators learn from people of faith? How might innovators nurture faith in the future? What leadership skills will empower faith in the future? And I've got the 10 future leadership skills I'm suggesting are in the book and will be shared throughout the day. What signals do you see of innovators giving things away and the trust they will get even more in return? And what counter signals, because there's always counter signals. And how can we grow our own bioempathy, our own empathy with the state of nature, our own sense of that biology for innovating and for nurturing faith in the future. So I hope this talk has given you some sense of faith in the future by introducing the VUCA world, both the positive and the hopeful, and by evoking innovation in your conversation. Each of you will be given inside of your book one of the stickers, which is my object to share, which says, "We are making the future," which draws from the 1939 World Fair remake, 1964 World's Fair remake, where the motto was, "I have seen the future," a very passive view of the future. My colleague Jason Tester has hacked that into, "I am making the future." And I hope I can leave you this morning with that sense of going out to make your own future. Thank you.